Hey everyone, welcome back to the Niche Pursuits podcast. I'm your host, Spencer Hawes from nichepursuits.com. And I've got a guest with me here today to talk about something a little bit different. Usually we're on here talking about building websites from scratch, SEO, and my guest has done a little bit of that, but he's doing something different now. And I think it's very interesting because I have a lot to learn about it. We're going to talk about Amazon wholesaling and a whole other bunch of other things as well. I've got Trent Dysrmid with me. Trent, welcome to the podcast.
Spencer, thank you very much for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here. We've known each other for a really long time, and I'm thrilled to be on your show.
Yeah, thanks for being here. We have known each other for a long time. We were just chatting briefly about that, trying to figure out how long ago it was, but I think it's been 7 or 8 years back when you were saying just before maybe I created Longtail Pro. We won't dive into your entire story because we can talk about those 7 or 8 years. You know, there's lots of stories there, but maybe you could just briefly, in 1 minute, tell us like, what were you doing 7 or 8 years ago and what are you doing now?
Sure. So, I built an offline business, an IT company, and I built that up to a few $1 million a year in revenue it took a long time, over about 7 or 8 years. And I sold that in 2008. And that's when I moved to San Diego. And that's when I discovered, niche sites. And I think that's roughly when you and I met, because I was doing the niche site thing way back then. And I started blogging about it. And that just sort of led me down a journey for the next, 4 or 5 years. And we ended up creating, a digital marketing agency, because when you blog and when you do a podcast like we both do, you get people reaching out to you asking for help, and eventually, you just end up taking on clients. And so it was the pivotal thing for me was in the summer of 2016. So we were running our agency. We'd been running it for, I think, about 4 years. And we had one really big client at that point in time, and life was pretty easy, to be honest with you. And then the client, shortly somewhere in and around there, they gave notice that they were going to leave, and I needed to find, something new, and I didn't really want to keep going in the agency space. And I interviewed this guy on my podcast by the name of Dan Meadors. And at the time that I interviewed Dan, I was struggling in private label, because about 3 or 4 months before that, one of my other internet friends, he said, "Oh man, you got to get into this Amazon thing. It's really awesome." And I knew nothing about this Amazon thing. I didn't know that I didn't know anything. So I just assumed.
We actually chatted, I remember briefly about it, about that time.
We did.
Because I was doing some private labeling just via Skype, here's what I'm doing, and you were getting into it. I remember that well.
Yeah. So I started in private label, and I was in private label for about 4 or 5 months by the time I interviewed Dan. And while my revenue was somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000 a month by then, I wasn't making any money because I'd chosen products that were too competitive. And so I was spending all sorts of money on pay-per-click advertising, trying to get these things to get traction. And it was really frustrating, and I was really, really disheartened by it. And now this big client had given notice. And so I was like, oh my gosh, man, what are we going to do? We've got to figure something out. And then I actually interviewed 2 people doing wholesale on my podcast. And the first guy is this dude named Eddie. And Eddie lived on airplanes and lived in hotels. He was constantly going to trade shows to find his products using the wholesale model. And I thought, wow, I don't really want to do that. I've got, my wife, I've got a young kid. I don't really like traveling that much. And Eddie, I think it was Eddie that introduced me to Dan. And I interviewed Dan, and he was doing, I think at the time, about 6 or 7 million. And he'd only been doing it for 2 years, and everything was done over email. He barely traveled. I don't think he traveled at all. And I was blown away. I was like, man, this wholesale thing, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
And we joke about it now because when I hung up the phone, or hung up the Skype, I should say, from that interview, I literally said to my wife, "We're going to do this starting today." And we got pretty impressive results. Within 5 months, we were doing over $100,000 a month. We did over $1 million in our first year, and it's just continued to grow. So it was a life changing decision for me to embrace the Amazon wholesale business model.
Wow, that's impressive that you were able to grow it so quickly. We're going to jump into how you did that, but before we do that, because I know people are probably asking, what in the world is Amazon wholesaling?
Yep. Because I didn't know it was a thing either.
Like, I kind of know what it is, but other people probably have no clue what it is.
All right. So let me explain the difference between private label and wholesale.
Yeah,
So in private
please.
label, most people spend hours and hours and hours doing product research using tools like Jungle Scout, trying to find the magical combination of a product niche where there's lots of demand but not too much competition, which is virtually impossible to do. And I don't consider myself skilled at finding, because the tools are so powerful, all the niches get exploited so incredibly quickly. And then so in my case, I picked a dog collar, one of those shock collars that they bark too much, it gives them a zap.
Okay.
And I picked a few other things, but this was my main thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so then, you get on Alibaba and you're looking for manufacturers that make this thing. And then you've got to order samples and you're talking to China on the Skypes in the early morning or late in the evening, which I wasn't too super stoked about because it would cut into my family time. And then ultimately, based on the samples, you pick your supplier, you order a couple $1,000 worth of your product and they ship it over to you and it's got your sticker on it. But you don't really have anything unique, to be honest with you. I mean,
most of the time, yeah.
Selling the same widget to somebody else.
Yep.
And then you've got to create your listings from scratch. And then you've got to get reviews. And back then it was a lot easier to get reviews, but now it's a lot harder. And so you hope that you did all your research right. And the whole process can take months, literally months, from the time that you start looking for product to you're actually in stock. And if you get it wrong, you literally can lose all of your money, because if the thing never sells, or you, in my case, have to spend so much money on pay-per-click advertising that you don't make any money, it's pretty frustrating. So wholesale is not like that at all. Wholesale, you are looking for products that are already on Amazon from a U.S. manufacturer. They already have a sales velocity. They already have reviews. There's all the data there to show you how well the product sells. And then you contact that U.S. manufacturer via the phone or email, or if they happen to be in your town, show up on their door, but that's unlikely. Mm-hmm. And you basically say, look, I want to become one of your authorized sellers. And a lot of the time, there won't be enough margin, or maybe they don't want any more sellers. And in my first 5 months, I only needed them to say yes 2% of the time. So I built systems to send a lot of emails every single week, and we got all these systems to generate all these leads, because it's really easy to do that part if you have good systems. And then you're basically put your little sales hat on and you say, look, I'm a really great third party seller. I'll help your brand. I'll help you do this. I'll help you solve this problem. I'll help you optimize your listings. I'll help you run pay-per-click campaigns. And some of them are going to say, yeah, okay, we're going to authorize you to be one of our sellers on Amazon. And so you place an order. And unlike private label, I don't need to go and get reviews. I don't have to create a listing. I might want to improve it a bit, but I don't even have to do that, because the product is already selling. And that's the big, big difference, because in wholesale, it's virtually, let's say you start off with a $2,500 order. It's virtually impossible to lose all your money, because again, you're buying a proven product that already sells. The worst case, the worst thing that can happen is, let's say when you looked at the product, it was $19.99 on Amazon and you were buying it for $10. And so you figured, okay, I've got enough margin, I'm going to make money. The worst thing that happens is the product goes from $19.99 to maybe $16.50. And now you're just breaking even, or maybe you're like losing 50 cents a unit.
Right.
But that's like the worst case scenario.
So let's back this up just a little bit, right? So, or to clarify. So you find somebody that already had a U.S. manufacturer that already has an Amazon listing.
They might not have created it, but the listing exists, or somebody at some point created that listing. Right.
Yes. And I could see that as well. Right. So it may or may not be a listing they've created. Okay. Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So then they say, yes, okay, we approve you to be a seller of that. Do you end up controlling the buy button? Do you show up in other sellers?
So
am I getting this all wrong?
Yeah. No, you're getting it right. Those are great questions.
Okay.
So when we look to purchase a product from a brand, from a US manufacturer, we'll look at, well, how many, let's just use an example. Let's say that the buy box is currently $19.99.
Mm-hmm.
So we assume that we need to be able to sell the product at $19.99 so that we're going to be auto rotated for a proportionate share of the buy box. Because maybe there's 2 other sellers or 3 other sellers and they're all at $19.99. So if we would be the 4th seller, we look at the total sales volume, which Jungle Scout or Viral Launch will give you. And we say, well, we would get a quarter of that because there's only 4 of us. We'd all have the Prime badge. We'd all be at $19.99. So all things being equal, we'll get roughly a quarter. And then we just do our math calculations on, well, is that enough? Does that make it worthwhile to carry that product or those products from that particular brand, which is just very, very simple math. And if it does, then we send them a purchase order and we place an order and they ship it to us.
So why would a manufacturer that already, let's say it is somebody that they created their listing and they're already selling on Amazon, why would they want other people involved?
Well, some do and some don't, but there's a very good reason to have more than one seller. So let's say this manufacturer, because our largest account, when they weren't yet doing business with us, they were the only seller of their products. Mm. But the problem is the guy that was doing it didn't really know what he was doing. He had a lot of other responsibilities in his job. And so he had, we'll just call it limited resources, those being expertise, time, whatever. So we come along and we say, look, if you will sell to us, we will take the burden of all the making sure that negative product reviews are dealt with, the listings are optimized. We'll invest some of our money in pay-per-click campaigns. We'll just do it all. And unlike a marketing agency that would say, we'll do it all and you can pay us thousands of dollars every month, we say, we'll do it all and we'll make our money on selling the products. All you need to do is sell us product wholesale at a price where we can make a profit and we'll just look after everything else. And for some brands, not for all of them, but for some brands, they think, well, hell yeah, that's a great deal because that's not our core business. You know, Amazon, because you got to remember, every brand is selling brick and mortar as well. And they were selling brick and mortar a lot longer than they were selling on Amazon.
Right.
So Amazon might only be 10% of a brand's total revenue. And they've built their company for years on expertise in manufacturing and creating products and finding retail distribution partners. And they've got that covered. But then there's this Amazon piece, and it's only 10% of their sales. They don't really know anything about it. And they don't necessarily want to learn anything about it. And they're like, yeah, I mean, if we can sell the stuff to you and you'll be our partner and you'll adhere to our map and you'll help us, sure, that's a great deal.
So this makes a lot of sense. So from a company's perspective, they're getting somebody ideally that is an expert at Amazon optimization, can run the pay-per-click campaigns, take care of negative feedback, and optimize the listing in general that maybe they don't have the expertise themselves. Correct. And their only cost really isn't a cost because they're still probably making a profit when they sell you the product wholesale, right? I mean,
most definitely.
Right? Like they're not losing money. They're like, sure, you can, yeah, you're getting a better deal than our retail customers, but we're still making some money.
Yeah, and most manufacturers aren't selling retail anyway. So they don't even think in terms of retail dollars. They just think in terms of wholesale dollars.
Yeah.
And so again, case by case basis, some products, we didn't have to go negotiate the price at all. Other products we did. It just depends upon, how well their retail price is being maintained on Amazon. Because very commonly, so manufacturers have this thing called MAP, minimum advertised price, and they hate it when their stuff is below MAP. Because let's say that I make widgets. I'm ABC company and I make widgets. And I'm Walmart's one of my big accounts. Mm-hmm. So Walmart is maybe 40% of my company's total revenue. So they're a big deal. And my MAP is $19.99. And Walmart has got it on the shelves for $19.99. And then because I don't have control of Amazon and I didn't have good policies, Amazon just kind of happened. Mm-hmm. It's at $17.99 on Amazon or $17.50 or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's a big problem for me because Walmart is screaming at me to get Amazon under control or they're going to stop buying from me. Now 40% of my total company's revenue is on the line because of the problems that are being caused by maybe 10% of my company's revenue that is being sold on Amazon. You follow?
Yeah. Yep. That makes a lot of sense.
So that's where and most brands have no idea how to identify unknown sellers and get MAP under control. And so as a good third-party seller, you're going to have solutions to this stuff.
Right.
And
so
there's the value.
You were starting to jump into how you got clients. You had developed, some systems to do a lot of prospecting. Can you touch on that a little bit more? Because that seems to be key to the whole thing, is how in the world do you find manufacturers that will let you do this?
Correct. It is very key to the whole thing. So when I started, I realized, well, there are hundreds of thousands of manufacturers, maybe millions, on Amazon, and I need a way to carpet bomb because I need to generate, the qualities and the quantity. And I need to send out enough emails to the right companies to give myself the opportunity to get some yeses. And if you don't have the systems that I'm about to explain, being able to send, like in our case, we started off sending 100 emails a week. So that means we identified 100 new products each and every week that met our criteria. And then we got the contact information for those companies. And we sent them an email. That would be a lot of labor, correct? And it's a lot of work.
Absolutely.
So I realized in order to make that happen, I was going to need to make use of virtual assistants. We typically hire out of the Philippines. And those people, you're paying anywhere from $2, $3, $4 an hour. So the cost of labor is much, much lower. And then maybe if I use some good software tools, I could semi-automate this and maybe try and get a lot of labor out of it. And that's exactly what I did. So I set out to build, because the guy who I interviewed on my show, he explained to me how to do it, but he didn't explain to me how to efficiently do it, because he has a training program now. And so the how generally comes from a training program. And I am my mind works so much in a way of, I break everything down into processes, and then I document those processes, and then I delegate them. So I thought to myself, well, what's the first step? Well, the first step is you need to find products. So one way of doing that is you find other third-party sellers that have these products in their inventory and that are already selling them. And then we use the term extract. You extract all of those products from every one of those sellers and you put it into a spreadsheet. So there's a piece of software that does that called Price Checker 2. There's another one called, I think Tactical Arbitrage can also do that. So there's not a lot of labor per se in that portion. And it's really kind of check the box type work. So I thought, well, I'm not going to do that myself. I'm going to document a system that explains step by step with screenshots and checkboxes and all sorts of things exactly how it's done. And then I'm just going to give that system to a virtual assistant so that they can do it over and over and over and over again.
Right.
So that's kind of like the first part. So now I've got all these products in a spreadsheet. And so I built this spreadsheet that had these pre-populated formulas that would be able to do the math automatically. Because at the end of the day, all I wanted to know for each, if a product was a row in the spreadsheet, and let's say there was 100 rows, 100 products from one extraction, how many of those had the right math that would make sense for us to start to sell them? And so I created some formulas in the spreadsheet that would calculate that. It would look at the total sales volume as estimated by Jungle Scout or Viral Launch, either one. It would look at how many current sellers were that were in contention for the buy box. So that means they would be the low price sellers with a Prime badge. So let's say if there was three, let's say it was doing $10,000 a month in sales gross, or 20 or whatever, we'll just say 10. And if there's three current sellers, and we assume that we would be the fourth, well, everybody, all things being equal, each of us four sellers would get about $2,500 each, because the Amazon algorithm will just rotate it around the four of us. Mm-hmm. Unless one of us has a really crappy seller rating or, whatever, our price is out to lunch. But, we knew what our seller rating was and we assumed that we'd be at the right price.
Yeah.
So, and then we would just assume that we'd make a 15 or 20% profit margin on our $2,500. And, that equated to a product that would make us maybe $300-$400 a month. Okay, well, we'd like to carry that one because if you could have 10 of those, now you're making 4,000 a month. Or if you could have 20 of those, now you're making 8,000 a month in profit. And so this spreadsheet would then, indicate which products we should go after. And then I'd have another virtual assistant then for the products that we wanted to go after. They would just go and they'd go on to LinkedIn and they'd find, who should we talk to, like who's the correct person and what's an email address. And then once we did that, then we just started sending a whole bunch of emails, and we had a couple of different tools that we used for that. One of them was called, in the beginning, we would just use HubSpot because we could send them one at a time. A VA could go and click send, click send, click send, click send, which is a little bit laborious. And eventually we discovered a tool called Gmass, which allows you to pretty much send them all at one time right from your Gmail account. Mm-hmm. And then it became, with these systems, and virtual assistants, it became pretty darn easy to be able to send 100 or 200 emails a week. And so my labor wasn't involved in really that part of it because now that had all been delegated to virtual assistants. So then what I had to do is, let's say on Monday or Tuesday, whatever day of the week you like, we've got 100 emails going out. Well, we're going to get replies. So those would come into my inbox. Now the work for me would begin. Because now I have to look at these replies. Well, what did they say? Did they want me to fill out a wholesale account application before I could get a price list, which is pretty common? So then I would get a price list, and then I'd have to look at the top selling products, and I'd have to look at the wholesale price, and then I'd look at the retail price on Amazon, and could I make any money on it? So I would spend a fair amount of my time each week, the bulk of my time each week, looking at all the replies and just dealing with them. And sometimes I would try and negotiate for a better price. Other times the pricing was good enough, although I always really would try and negotiate for a better price. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, it's like walking around looking for little flakes of gold, and you just pick them up and put them in your pocket.
I love it. So that makes sense. So tell me if this little light bulb that just went on for me makes sense or holds true, if I'm thinking about this properly. So essentially what you're doing here with wholesaling on Amazon really is very similar to what a lot of people call retail arbitrage in a certain regard. With retail arbitrage, what that is people, go to their local, grocery store, whatever, outlet store, whatever. They buy things that maybe are on the clearance rack for really cheap, and then they go list that as a, third-party seller on Amazon, right? And they list a price, and at the right time, somebody's going to buy that. They make $5 or $10 on the item, whatever it is. For lack of a better term, you're essentially doing the same thing. You're just sanctioned by the manufacturer, and you have a guaranteed wholesale price that you can go back to time and time again.
Yes, and there's another really big difference. Okay. With retail arbitrage, which I never did, and here's why I didn't do it. You have to continually go to the store, scan products, buy more products, etc. It's very, very laborious. Yep. Whereas once an account says yes, it is a gravy train of cash, because all I have to do every month is send them another purchase order for another order. Send me another pallet. Oh, sold it all. Send me another pallet. Like, I don't have to go to the mall and wander around with my phone in my hand thinking, what deals might I find today? Yeah. So it's massively different. And that's why I didn't retail arbitrage.
That's why I never did retail arbitrage either. It's like, I hate shopping as it is. Like, I'm not going to spend hours trying to make $20. Right?
Hell no.
It's just not going to happen. I had a follow-up question to that. Is there a separate login for wholesaling, or is it literally still you're logging in through Amazon Seller Central? You're doing that same process?
Yep, same exact thing. Okay. And let me introduce one other idea as well. For people who are listening, like to be successful in wholesale, by the way we've explained it so far, you do need to have some money to be able to purchase the inventory. And at some point, there's a couple of really cool things that will happen. So once because as you land more brands and get more products, you might run out of money, So how do you solve that problem? And this is another huge advantage of wholesale. Although maybe this applies to private label as well. Once you've been selling for, I think it's a year, and you've been doing over 10,000 a month for a year, you'll start getting these magical little emails from Amazon saying from Amazon Lending saying, we'd like to lend you some money. And Amazon will literally drown you in cash. If you do it properly, every time you pay off a loan and they offer you another one, it'll be bigger. So like the last email we got, Amazon's like, well, we'll lend you $600,000. Like you literally can't run out of money. Yeah. And you pay 13.99% per year interest, which some people that might think, oh my gosh, that's so high. But think about this. If I'm turning my inventory, right now I turn it about 7 times a year. And our average ROI, and I'm probably going to get a little too deep in the weeds for some folks here, but you make a roughly 30% ROI each time you turn your inventory. So if I'm turning my inventory 7 times per year, 7 times 30 is 210% return on my money. And I've only got to pay 14% for that money. How often would you like to do that?
As many times as possible, right?
Correct. Like if I can buy a $2 bill, if I can give you a $1 bill and you'll sell me a $2 bill for $1, how many do I want? All of them.
Yep, an infinite amount.
Correct. And then there's one other approach. Let's say you find a brand. You don't necessarily even have to buy from them. Once you've got a track record, you could simply say, you know what? I'll run your Seller Central account, if they have one, and some brands do, for a percentage of the gross sales. Now you don't even have to buy the inventory, but you still have all the upside.
Wow. That's interesting. Do you have any deals like that?
We did in the beginning, and then we didn't go. And that was my very first account, which I picked up at a trade show, oddly enough. And then we didn't pursue any more of those. But now we're actually thinking of doing that because it's better than, like, if the brand says, no, we want to be the only seller on the account, or we just don't want to authorize you or whatever. Well, it's just another way of going at it. And so we're going to start putting that into our toolbox, or our offering, as it were.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. I think we've given some really good examples, but maybe you can give one concrete example, either of a product that you're doing this for, or a product that there are wholesalers doing this, right? Just you mentioned dog collars before. I don't know if anybody's doing dog collars, but maybe you can walk through an example of, here's a product, here's the wholesale price, here's what it's selling for on Amazon, that sort of thing.
Okay, so I actually earlier this morning did an analysis of a really fast growing competitor of ours. And so I looked at all the brands that they have, and I looked at all the products. And so I'll just give you an example of one of the brands. So one of the brands that this company carries is, which one do I want to pick? We'll just go with Nature's Sunshine. So this company approached, Nature's Sunshine, and they said the things that we've been talking about in Nature's Sunshine, and then it worked. They don't have an exclusive relationship. They're not the only seller that sells Nature's Sunshine. Well, the brand Nature's Sunshine sells on Amazon, according to Viral Launch, about $930,000 a month. And they have many products.
Wow.
So what do you think I'm going to do? I'm going to call Nature's Sunshine, and I'm going to say, hey, I want to be a seller too. Now, again, most times people say no. You have to understand that. That's why you need good systems, so that you can. It's like sales. You got to knock on enough doors, make enough cold calls, whatever. You only need them to say yes, 2 to 3% of the time, and you're golden.
Yeah.
So that's what we do. We study our competitors, and we just find brands that would appeal to us. So in the case of Nature's Sunshine, they've got one product that's called Nature's Sunshine Nutricom Tablets 100 count. Well, according to Viral Launch, and it sells for $28.55. Okay. So according to Viral Launch, that product, I'm just waiting for it to come up. That particular bottle of pills sells $15,285 a month worth.
Wow.
So if if it's selling for $28, I already know that I probably got to buy it for about $14, which is going to be pretty close to what wholesale price is going to be. Because usually wholesale prices are about half of retail prices.
Right.
So, all right. So that particular one, if I could get, my share of the buy box and I could make a 15 to 20% gross profit margin on that, would I like to carry that product? You're damn right I would. I want to carry that product all day long because it's a proven seller. And that's just one product from this brand. This brand does $950,000 a month. I'm going to try and carry as many of their products as I can.
Absolutely. No, I agree. And so I know earlier you shared roughly how much you guys are making. I think you said you hit $1 million in your first year, or
we did
just last year. Yeah.
First year.
Okay. What are you on track to do this year? Do you know?
Yep, I do. We will do probably 3 million-ish this year.
And that's in revenue, right? So 15 to 20% of that would be your net.
Correct. Now I've got expenses because, I built a team and I have an office and, these things, but you don't have to have all that stuff in the beginning. Like when I started, it took me 5 months to go from 0 to 500 to $100,000 a month. At that point in time, it was me. I could have been working. I wasn't working out of my house, but I could have. And it was me and a part-time prep person. So you would only use them when you needed them. It was 3 or 4 VAs at, $2 or $3 an hour each. And a little bit of my wife's time. That was it.
Right.
And our margins weren't as good back then as they are now, because I wasn't as good at picking brands. I wasn't as good at negotiating. And we were running off of, I think about a 12 or 13% margin. So that's $12,000 or $13,000 a month of profit to pay me, to pay a little bit of my wife's time, and to pay for some VAs and some software. Right. There was more than enough. One of the guys I've had on my show, he does about $200,000 a month, and he doesn't even quit his job. He works at a bank as well, probably the same bank that you used to work at, actually. And he's built that business just part-time. Now, I would say that his name is Josh. I would say he's probably the exception. He's a particularly driven individual. He's particularly bright, and he's using the systems that I developed. I'll take the smallest amount of credit in that equation. He's particularly driven, and he's particularly bright, and that's why he's been successful. But he's built a multi-million-dollar Amazon wholesale business without even quitting his job at the bank.
Wow, that's impressive. And and I can see that because I know I am doing Amazon private label right now, and there are a lot of ways that it can be very hands-off. You can be as hands-on or as hands-off as you want to be, because Amazon makes it so easy. Don't they? Right? You ship in your product, they handle the rest, right?
That's it.
So once it's there,
there's no fulfillment. There's no pick, pack, ship. You just send it to them.
Exactly.
Put some stickers on it and send it to them. Hell, you don't even have to put the stickers on. You can pay Amazon to put the stickers on if you want to.
Exactly. And so there really are a lot of ways to make it very hands-off. And so you've talked a little bit about your processes and procedures and how that's worked so well for you. Like, do you just have those procedures set up for finding, prospecting, or do you have, sort of processes for everything beginning to end?
Everything. Absolutely everything. So I'm just going to pull up my little table of contents on my processes here. Just give me a second.
Okay.
So product sourcing in the beginning is the most important part, because if you don't have products to sell, well, then nothing else matters, right? But as soon as you start to get products to sell, you're going to have other things you need to have processes for. So you're going to need to have processes for your Amazon PPC campaigns. You're going to need to have processes for inventory management. You're going to need to have processes for product listing optimization. You're going to need to have processes for product prep. You're going to need to have processes for product pricing management, for purchasing, for handling reviews, for shipping, for supplier relations, for HR, for finance. Like when you become successful at this, you end up having a business and you're going to probably hire some people. And you can't do it all yourself. It's highly ineffective. So you need to build business processes. And that's what we did. And that's why the other thing that was really cool with my Amazon wholesale business is I was actually able to delegate myself completely out of a job within the first year.
Yeah.
I didn't even work there anymore. Now I'm temporarily working there again now because one of my employees left and I'm filling in his role until I find another employee or two. And then I'm going to fire myself again. And it goes back to, for me, now my wife works in it, but for me, it's purely passive income because I was just insanely obsessed with documenting everything.
And I know that we've chatted previously that you are making these processes, these procedures available to other people if they want them, if they are interested in doing Amazon wholesale. Maybe you can talk about that, how other people are able to use those and
yeah, sure,
the platform that you've built there.
So that was a very happy accident. The backstory in that is I built all these processes because we simply needed them.
Right.
I mean, you can't do $1 million in a year without the whole thing going kaplooey unless you have processes to keep the wheels on. And the guy that I interviewed on my podcast, Dan Meadors, he does sell a training course. It's called the Wholesale Formula, and it gets launched, I think, twice a year, where he teaches people how to do this. And Dan calls me up one day. He says, "Hey, we're going to do a live event for our students so they can all, get together and network and learn and do all the good things that you'd want to do." He says, "You've been really crazy successful. Would you like to come and speak and explain to people, what you did to be so successful so fast?" And I said, "Yeah, that sounds fun. I'll do that." And so he paid for my plane ticket to get there. And I was on a panel on the first day. So his audience, they kind of had gotten to know me because I produce a lot of videos for free and I got my podcast that's free. And so people sort of kind of knew me. And then once I was on this panel, I answered a lot of questions from the audience. And so there was a lot of interest for the talk that I was going to give the next day. And so my talk was, I took an hour and I explained how I used all these systems to grow this $1 million Amazon business in the first year with a particular focus on how we source products. And at the beginning of it, I said, "Hey, everybody, I got nothing for sale. Take good notes." And it's a relatively complex process to build all this. I mean, if you're if your brain works like mine does, you'll figure it out. But it's a lot to take in an hour. Like, I think if I was sitting in the audience and I'd never done it before, there's no way I could have taken it in within an hour. There's just too much detail. And as the speaker, I can only go so deep into the weeds, right? So at the end of that talk, you've got the microphones in the aisles. People are coming up with the microphones, and more or less everybody's asking me the same thing. "Hey, Trent, would you sell me a copy of your standard operating procedures?" is what we call them. And I was like, I don't know. I guess we'll have to think about that. And so I went back to the office, when I got home from the trip, and talked to my wife about it. And then I talked to Dan about it, and I said, "Yeah, I guess we could see if this will work." I mean, we really just because some people came up to the microphones doesn't mean it's going to sell very well.
Right.
So I came up with a name called Wholesale E-commerce Business Systems, and which is WEBS is the acronym. And we just basically took all of our systems that we built. And back then, this was about a year ago, I think we had 55 or 56 standard operating procedures in all the categories that we talked about a few minutes ago. And so we just made a copy of them and found somebody else's software application, and we put all of our content, all of our standard operating procedures into this other software application, which was designed for that purpose. And we offered it for sale. And holy cow, we sold almost $1 million worth in the first 6 months.
Whoa.
I was blown away. Absolutely blown away.
That's huge.
Yeah, it was another life-changing moment.
I'm sure it was.
And so, now the product we've continued to evolve it. Now the number of SOPs, I don't know, maybe it's 7 or 8. I don't even know what it is. And now that it's a product that other people use, we've worked really, really hard on making it, as straightforward as we can, have as much detail as we can, and instructions and so forth. And people have, there's people who've given us testimonials that, we've literally changed their lives. Like a perfect example is this couple. So I mentioned Josh earlier, the banker guy, he uses it. There's another guy, Nate. I mean, he was on my podcast. He was struggling, and then he bought it and he doubled his business in 3 months. And then there was this other couple, Kip and April, who were doing retail arbitrage, and they didn't see a great future for that. So they wanted to succeed in wholesale, but they weren't succeeding until they bought Webs, and then it changed their just game changer for them. So the thing for people to understand is Webs isn't a training course per se. Like most times when you buy a training course, you get access to the members area and there's all these videos that you watch, and then you got to take a bunch of notes, or maybe you get your VA to watch a video or whatever, but it's just videos. This is not that. This is actual software that has standard operating procedures in the software, so that for a given task that needs to be done over and over and over again, you simply take that particular SOP and you assign it to one of your VAs. And it's so detailed that you don't need to make a training video on how to do the thing, because the thing is explained in excruciating detail, step by step by step, with words and checkboxes and pictures and so forth, right within the standard operating procedure.
Yeah.
So in that regard, there's no, like with a training course, you're like, well, I've watched, 10 hours of videos, but now what do I do? With this, exactly what, because it's like a menu. You go into a restaurant, and you say, well, I feel like having a hamburger. So you go to the hamburger section and you order a hamburger, and it arrives at your table and there's your hamburger. In this regard, if you're sourcing products, you go to the product sourcing folder, and the first step of sourcing products is product extraction. So you look at the product extractions checklist, and you could do it yourself, but why would you when you could hire a VA for $2 an hour and they can do it?
So all of the how-tos are already directly in the platform itself. It just becomes a matter of assigning that procedure, right?
Correct.
Whether you assign it to yourself or a VA or other employees, you don't have to teach them how. They will know how by following the steps.
Correct. Think of it in another way. You go and you could start your own burger joint from scratch, or you can buy a McDonald's. What do you get when you buy a McDonald's? You get all sorts of marketing support and blah, blah, blah. But the main thing you get is standard operating procedures for how to do everything in that restaurant.
Right.
McDonald's does not want their franchisees reinventing the wheel on anything, or Subway or whoever. They say, this is the way that we figured out that it works. That is exactly what Webs is. This is the way that we figured out how it works. Just do it this way. Now, if you want to edit it, click the edit button. If you want to make changes, totally you can do that, but you don't need to.
Right. So it's almost like they're getting a franchise from Trent here in a way, right? Except they don't have to pay you any royalties.
No royalties. They just buy it for a one-time fee.
One-time fee up front, and then they use it.
To access the I should quantify that they do have to pay user fees for the software.
Sure.
But that's like not a percentage of their sales. It's like $10 or $15 a month per user. It's cheap.
Right. Very cool. That makes a lot of sense, actually, the way you described that. So it's like, yeah, you could take a training course and get all the how-to videos, but then you would have to write your own standard operating procedures if you don't want to do it yourself. Or Correct. You could just get the Webs platform. It's already got everything built in and you're ready to go.
That is precisely correct.
Cool.
Like when we hire a new VA, we don't go through a training and orientation period. As a matter of fact, it even affects the way we hire. Like we don't even do interviews. When we need a new VA, we simply put a posting on online jobs.ph or Upwork or wherever, and we literally will take five of them who look the best on paper, and we'll just assign them one of our standard operating procedures, which is so they're going to do the thing that we're hiring them for. And then out of those 5, whoever did the thing that most accurately in the shortest amount of time, we just hire them.
That's cool.
So it makes hiring VAs a whole lot easier as well.
Yeah.
And if you have turnover, no problem, because it's easy. If you have great systems, your business is not going to be singularly dependent upon a particular individual, because you're not relying on their memory. You're not relying on their experience. I mean, sure, that's an added bonus, and they'll accumulate experience over time. But ideally, what they're doing with that experience is they're using it to improve the checklist, to improve the standard operating procedure, which is what we do in our own business. We continually are iterating and improving, or if we change a piece of software, we make the changes and then we push those changes out to our customers.
So if people want to get access to webs, I know you actually don't have this open all the time. You just do certain times of year, you open it. I guess you tell me, how often do you open the doors for this?
So far, it's only been for sale twice per year. So it's generally the spring and the fall. And because webs now consists of, some 70 odd checklists, there's lots of ways I guess we could slice it up in the future, but the current plan is to continue with what we've been doing and only make it available twice per year, once in the spring and once in the fall.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And so that is, of course, coming up here. You're going to be opening the doors here real quick, and you're going to be doing, I believe you said, some live training
we do,
as part of that?
Yeah. So we do a webinar at the very beginning.
Okay.
Where I more or less go, because the webinar is visual, this is just audio. I go into my product sourcing formula in even more detail, and with the ability to show screenshots and so forth on the webinar, few people found it quite helpful. And then if you register for the webinar, you'll get the emails afterwards that show more pieces of free content and so forth. And at some point in time, I think it's about a week after the webinar, the card opens, and then for people who have seen enough and decided, hey, this is for me, they can go ahead and buy it. And then after they buy it, then there's, more training that we put, there's more training videos, there's webinars that we do to answer questions. We have a Facebook group. We try and do as best we can to make sure that people get all their questions answered after they purchase, so that they understand, how to use it and so forth. And being will be our third product launch, we've had the benefit of having the feedback from customers in the first two to refine webs and so forth. And I think this is going to be our best one yet.
Awesome. We'll set up a page where people can go to. If you're listening in on the podcast here, you can go to nichepursuits.com/webs. nichepursuits.com/webs. And after the fact here, I'll make sure that goes to that live training so you can watch the webinar or get more information about what webs is all about if you want to check that out and get started doing Amazon wholesaling. Trent, it's been great having you on the podcast. Is there anything else that I missed that you'd like to discuss or bring up?
No, I think that this is, I think we covered it.
Yeah.
We covered the difference between, wholesale and private label and my story and so forth. I would just, the only thing I would say is, like every business on planet Earth, being successful at this business requires that you work. You got to put in the time.
Yep.
And requires that you develop skills. Communication skills are the most important thing, because at the end of the day, your success will be the byproduct of your ability to effectively build relationships with these brands so that you can buy their products. So if you're someone who doesn't like talking to people, this probably isn't for you.
It's good to know. I think Amazon wholesaling is pretty cool. I think I had a couple of light bulb moments here just discussing it with you. I kind of understood what it was, but I think it's crystal clear now, at least for me. So hopefully people listening in understand what Amazon wholesaling is all about. There's still a lot of opportunity here in 2018. I'm sure 2019 and beyond, there's still plenty of opportunity. If people want to follow along with you in particular, where's the best place that they should go?
Just go to my blog, brightideas.co, or they can Google my name.
Yep.
Either or. Because I'm the only Trent Dysrmid on planet Earth, so it's pretty easy to find me on the Googles.
It's hard for you to hide.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Very good. brightideas.co if you want to follow along with Trent and what he's doing, his podcast and blog there. Or if you want to learn more about his standard operating procedures for Amazon wholesaling, you can go to nichepursuits.com. www.trentdysrmid.com/webs. Thanks a lot, Trent. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much for having me on the show, Spencer.
All right. Thanks a lot.